Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular meeting of council. I'll just start with the land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we live, work, and gather on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin people, specifically the Temiskaming First Nation. We recognize the presence of the Temiskaming First Nation in our community since time immemorial and honor their long history of welcoming many nations to this beautiful territory and uphold and uplift their voice and values. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. Roll call, please.
Good evening, Your Worship. All members are present with the exception of Councillor Melanie Ducharme.
Thank you. Item 4, review of revisions or deletions to the agenda. And I know there was one change where we've removed the audited financial statements. And there was also, I think, a typo change in the minutes.
Correct. In the agenda this evening, the question and answer period in the agenda that was published was noted as item 18. It was moved up to item 17 before the closed session. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Any other? Okay, we'll move on to item 5, approval of the agenda. And I have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that City Council approves the agenda as amended. Can I get a mover, please? This is Councillor Foley. Councillor Wilson. Discussion? All in favor? And that motion is carried. Item 6, disclosure of pecuniary interest in general nature. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 7, public meetings pursuant to the Planning Act, Municipal Act, and other statutes, and we have none tonight. Brings us to item 8, review and adoption of council minutes. And I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that City Council approves the following minutes as printed. A, the Committee of the Whole meeting held on August the 8th, 2023. B, the regular council meeting held on August the 8th, 2023. And C, the Committee of the Whole meeting held on September the 5th, 2023. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Graydon. Thanks, Councillor Pelche-Leming. Discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. It brings us to item 9, presentations and delegations. And I just thanks. So we have Barry White here tonight, a resident, and has a little presentation he'd like to share with the New Lisker Marina property. Barry, if you want to.
Hello, my name is Barry Waite and I live at 54 Catherine Street. Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff, I am here to speak to you about the disposition and use of 199 Riverside Drive, otherwise known as the Marina property. First, I'd like to say I'm very pleased that between the time the public consultation process started and the expression of interest was drafted, that the expression of interest expanded to not only include the potential sale of the property, but also leasing the property. This was a good change, but I do not believe it went quite far enough. Not that long ago, the primary purpose of property ownership was to facilitate whatever land use an owner wanted for it, such as your home or business. Now, for many, property is a commodity to be bought and sold to make a profit. This should not be the principal driver for government. Looking for the highest and best use is the language of appraisers and realtors, and is a consideration for government, but the primary consideration must be what is in the public interest. If the city considers the public interest, ownership needs to be addressed as well as land use. Waterfront properties are being acquired by municipalities in many cities across Canada at great cost for one of two purposes. One is to consolidate land holdings to accommodate larger comprehensive developments that achieve city goals and are designed with an eye to the long-term vision of the city. The second is to provide continuous access to waterfront for its citizens and visitors. Let's look at each of these. This 3.5-acre property is ideally located at the mouth of the Wabi River within an area of underutilized properties and only 3 blocks from the commercial center of New Liskeard. This is not in any way meant to lessen the value of current uses of the land of this area, such as the Fall Fair, Village Noel, and temporary uses that come along. But the question needs to be asked, does this sale of this property represent a lost opportunity for something really important to the future of Temiskaming shores? Is this an idea that achieves short-term goals at the expense of long-term strategic planning? If Temiskaming shores were to ever see a major development such as a conference center or an entertainment facility would really put this city on the map, I cannot think of a better location. Once this property is sold, it is very unlikely the city and its citizens will ever get it back. The public notification said the city intends to maintain ownership of the boardwalk. But I am not sure that this is enough to adequately address the public interest as it relates to the waterfront experience for both residents and visitors. The city may protect the boardwalk, but if the private sector is allowed to construct a building that looms over the boardwalk, the experience is significantly diminished, particularly if the building is for private use, such as condominiums. This could have been dealt with through conditions in the expression of interest, but can still be addressed through zoning and other legal mechanisms. While I would like to have seen development parameters before the EOI was sent out to set the tone for what the city wants, it is not too late to strongly indicate to the private sector what is acceptable and what is not, particularly as it relates to the waterfront experience. I understand why the city is looking to do something with this property. Maintenance of the property costs money, and renovations are needed on the buildings, which also cost money, and it is seen as underutilized. It is only reasonable to address this, but selling it does not consider the long-term public interest. If the city is intent on covering their losses on this property and seeing it used for something, but still considering long-term development opportunities, I believe the city should focus on leasing the property. Some have questioned whether the private sector would want to lease the property. Well, what I say is that depends. It depends on a whole lot of things. One is, what is the term of the lease? Is it long enough for a reasonable development to see a return on their investment? Another question, of course, is what development will be permitted by the city? And this is where council has the difficult responsibility to balance the financial expectations of the private sector with that public interest I speak of. Next, would the expression of interest look for a lease for the whole property, or could it just be for a building footprint, thus excluding the private sector from having to maintain the whole property? And finally, could the lease be a subordinated lease agreement which would help the developer get construction financing? Again, I commend whoever decided to include the leasing option in the expression of interest. However, I fear that by putting it in with the purchasing of the property, the leasing option will be ignored by the private sector simply because it's easier to make the numbers work in the development's pro forma. I also appreciate the latest changes at EOI with putting forth an option to purchase or lease a 1.73 acre portion of the property. All good changes. Finally, the development question. Given the recreation definition as it relates to the designation of the official plan, it would appear likely that this would need to change if the city sells the property or even leases it out. And I just would comment that it would be interesting to follow that process for the property. The zoning of the property is C1 general commercial, which permits a wide variety of uses, many of which are inappropriate for this key site on the waterfront. These include things like single-family dwellings, funeral homes, and laundromats. Prior to finalizing any agreement involving the disposition of the property, the city should initiate and complete a rezoning amendment to apply a site-specific zoning to the property, which reflects the input of the community and the final decision of council. Some land uses will be more appealing to the citizens of Temiskaming Shores who want to protect property adjacent to waterfront, and some will be more appealing to the private sector to get a return on their investment. But the bottom line I'm saying here is the city should take some steps to avoid the most inappropriate uses being allowed on this site. Industrial and agriculture uses are obviously not appropriate at this key location, and I would say that permitting a condominium development would be contrary to both the potential long-term possibility of the city facilitating a larger comprehensive development involving other underutilized lands in this area and protecting the public interest as it relates to the waterfront experience. Some commercial uses, such as a restaurant or types of public assembly, involve a public-oriented function. Restaurants are a commercial business, but they may be open to the public in a way that residential development and businesses are not. Building on the concept of any development having a public function and maintaining an open field to the area, it is my recommendation that Council follow these three principles for any development of this property. 1, that the land uses be limited to recreational uses or those commercial uses which demonstrate an interactive public function, which should be demonstrated by both land use and the building design. 2, open space is important to maintain in this area, both for the long-term and the short-term and long-term comprehensive development planning for the area. In recognition of this, the maximum lot coverage should be limited to 25%. 3, that the waterfront experience along this property be retained by requiring a minimum setback of 15 meters from the property line. In summary, what I call my action items are: A, lease the property or a building footprint, whichever is more appealing to the private sector, but do not sell it. B, if necessary, amend the designation for the site in the official plan. C, rezone the property to reflect the site-specific desires of the community in the final conclusion to council. D, adhere to the development parameters above to orient the site to interactive public functions and maintain the open space feel for the area. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I look forward to hearing your decision on this matter. And just to make it clear, this presentation was just on behalf of myself, but I also have 1,600 signatures opposed to the sale of the property on behalf of the Friends of the Waterfront to deliver to the clerk. Where's the clerk?
Thanks for your presentation, Barry. Does anybody have any questions for Barry? Councillor Whalen?
Yeah, to start, I want to thank you for your presentation. It's very informative, but it's also educated. At no time yet has the city actually said this property is for sale. We've gone out for ideas on what to do with the property, and your presentation expresses that and gives us good points, which we will take under consideration. Unfortunately, there are lots of stories out there. I'm not going to comment on the 1,600 signatures. I don't know where they came from. I can go out and get, 2,600, but that's irrelevant to me. Informative discussions like we're having here tonight are what's important. So again, I really appreciate that, and I hope somehow the message gets out there that we want valid discussions on this. Some of the stories have been told out of the booth at the Fall Fair simply are expressions of non-truths. So that's unfortunate. But again, I appreciate this two-way discussion, and it will be taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Anybody else? No? Okay, again, thanks so much, Barry. I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a great evening. Brings us to item 10, correspondence and communication. So 10A, the Honourable Todd Smith, Minister of Energy, read that Powering Ontario's Growth, and that's been received for information. 10B from the Temiskaming First Nations 2023 Powwow Committee, and to read a thank you letter that was also received for information. 10C from Sherry Buffett, a resident, read an application to purchase municipal land, and that's been referred to the clerk to process in accordance with bylaw number 2015-160, the policy for the disposal of real property. 10D, North on Tap Craft Beer Festival, and read a media release for the 5th annual North on Tap Craft Beer Festival raises the $94,000 for the community, which is really amazing, and that was received for information purposes. 10E from the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Rebuilding Faster Fund, and that was received for information. F, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and that was the 2022 Post-Enumeration Report and Property Assessment Update. That was received for information. G, the Municipality of St. Charles, a resolution for support for National Housing Strategy Initiatives, and that was received for information. 10H from Jennifer Keys, the Director for the Resources Planning and Development Policy Branch, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. Streamlining of approvals under the Aggregate Resources Act and supporting policy, that was received for information. 10I from Allison Gray, the Clerk for the Township of Severn. Read the resolution for support, just transition transfer, and that was received for information. J from the Township of Matachewan. Read the resolution for support, legislation to strengthen municipal codes of conduct and compliance. That was received for information purposes. 10K from Dr. Charles Garter, the President of the Association of Local Public Health Agencies. Read public health funding and capacity announcement, and that was received for information. L from Nick Tolpin, the President of South Temiskaming ATV Club. Read the ATV Club in Temiskaming, and that was received for information. At 10M, Dr. Glenn Cornell, the Acting Medical Officer of Health for the Temiskaming Health Unit. Read the voluntary merger of the Porcupine Health Unit and the Temiskaming Health Unit. That was received for information. 10N from the Temiskaming Health Unit. Read the report to the Board of Health, mid-year report, January to June 2023. That was received for information. 10O from the Temiskaming Health Unit. Read the Board of Health briefing report, Ontario vape tax. That was received for information purposes. 10P from Stacey White, the Board of Health Chair, Temiskaming Health Unit. Read the universal no-cost coverage for all prescription contraceptive options for all Ontarians. That was received for information purposes. 10Q, the City of Clarence Rockland. Read the resolution of support, third-party study of the Ottawa River. And that was received for information. 10R from Bonnie Nistico Dunk, the Town Clerk for the Town of Grimsby. Read the resolution of support establishing a guaranteed livable income. That was received for information. 10S, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities, FNUM. Read the resolution of support for the Northern Ontario School of Medicine's request for permanent increase in annual funding. And there will be a motion presented under new business. 10T, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities, FNUM. Read the policy documents presented in delegations during the 2023 AMO conference, and that was received for information purposes. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved, the Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores agrees to deal with communication items 10A through T in accordance with the agenda references. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Foley. Councillor Wilson. Discussion. Councillor Wilson.
Just a couple items to bring back out of that. J, the Municipal Code of Conduct, and Q, the Ottawa River study Is there some background on that? I'm not familiar with that. Is anybody, where are we at with that particular process? It sounds like an important study that we should be interested in, and I'm just wondering about that.
Did you want to?
Yeah, I think that it wouldn't necessarily directly impact our area, but anything that we do in this area is ultimately impacting downstream. So may want to maybe at least join in and find out how much of the river system they will include, just in case there is other things that impact upstream.
Yeah, that's really what I guess it's for more information on it, and I'm not quite sure how we move that through right now, but do we just bring it back?
Yeah, we would bring it back to a future meeting,
Yeah.
Councillor Wilson, and they are looking for support for a third-party review of what's being done.
Yeah. Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome.
And I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, lastly,
Yep.
are the livable income resolution?
Okay.
That's it. Thank you. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Anybody else? Councillor Pelcher-Living.
So we had a lot of correspondence on this agenda. So I had the same ones noted as Councillor Wilson. Also, just to congratulate North on Tap for their great efforts and just putting up such a great event and having so much to give back to the community. I think it's commendable.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And yeah, and just again, a little bit more on North on Tap, because you talk about the money that was fundraised, but what we don't talk about is the amount of hours that were put in to organize, that event, and it does take a lot of time. And I also want to say thank you, to the staff that supported that event, because there is a lot of work that goes in from the city staff as well to support, those types of events, but it definitely does have, a positive impact on the community, and it is really nice to see. So we do have a resolution in front of us. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item 11, Committees of Council, Community and Regional. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that the following minutes be accepted for information. A, the minutes of the Police Services Board meeting held on August the 10th, 2023. The draft minutes of the Temiskaming Transit Committee meeting held on June the 15th, 2023. And C, the minutes from the Temiskaming Health Units Board of Health meetings held on June the 7th, 2023 and August the 10th, 2023. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Graydon. Thanks, Councillor Wayland. Discussion? No? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item 12, reports by members of council. And I know Councillor Whalen did, submit something. So, Councillor Whalen, for the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. It was provided to members of council just to reassure them. We touched base with the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing with regards to the boreal forest issue in northeastern Ontario. I think we're up to 4 now. Unfortunately, shortly after the delegations, there was a cabinet shuffle not too long ago, so I'll be in Toronto next week, hopefully able to touch base with the new Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing just to make sure that he keeps the issue on the forefront. The one issue, in fact, I think I spoke to the mayor about this, is this new building homes faster, 1.2 billion carrot that's dangling in front of municipalities. I don't have a lot of faith in that. I don't know of a municipality in northeastern Ontario that's not looking for growth and not trying to promote housing, so I think it's a southern Ontario large municipal benefit. And that's who's going to benefit from it. Apparently 10% is put away for Northern Ontario and rural Ontario, but even when you consider that rural Ontario also includes 50% of Southern Ontario, that's a pretty slim 10%. So I'm not opposed to it, but I don't see how it's going to affect housing growth in Northern Ontario. So it was an interesting conference. Like I say, unfortunately, we did lose some ministers. Minister Maroney that the city's had great dealings with. Unfortunately, maybe fortunately for her, but unfortunately for us, she's been moved to a different portfolio, but we'll have to see how we make out with the new ministers.
Thanks, Councillor Whalen. Anyone else? I just wanted to mention a couple of things with September 30th coming and the National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Wayne McKenzie has reached out to the city and offered to provide some training to all of staff and council to just to educate us maybe a little bit more, bring in awareness of the Aboriginal culture, of politics, and maybe some clarity of myths and stigmas around the area. And so I know with September 30th actually falling on a weekend this year, the training is going to be provided on September the 28th. And staff and council, there's 2 different sessions, so if you can fit it into your schedule, it would be great, from 9:30 to 11:30 on September the 28th, and also 1:30 to 3:30. And that's all I had. And nothing else. We'll move on to item 13, notice of motions. And we do have a notice of motion from Councillor Mark Wilson. And did you want me to read the notice of motion, Mark, or would you like to?
I can if
Sure,
you like.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just a slight introduction to it, a brief introduction to it, if that's all right, Mayor. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
$5.
Safety above all must be the highest priority on the streets and roads of the City of Temiskaming Shores. And to achieve safer roads and streets, the first step to be considered by the City of Temiskaming Shores is to do as many other municipalities have done and adopt a Vision Zero framework which uses safe system measures to manage the road system. The goal is to achieve 0 fatalities and serious injuries on our road network, to establish a culture of road safety, and to make Temiskaming Shores a safe environment for all types of mobility. This focus on safety will provide guidance for council and road managers when considering decisions related to roads and streets. In effect, looking at any road network decisions through a safety-first lens. So with that said, my notice of motion is as follows. Whereas the principles of Vision Zero were first implemented in Sweden in 1997, and these principles are based on safe system road design, and many other jurisdictions around the world and across Canada have adopted Vision Zero, including the Netherlands, Ireland, Norway, Denmark, Australia, New Zealand, Montreal, Edmonton, Toronto, Kingston, and many, many others. Whereas it is inevitable that humans will make mistakes when using the road network, and safe system design principles reduce the kinetic energy of crashes that occur when these mistakes are made, and thereby drastically increase the chance of survival for those involved in the crash. And whereas Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores supports the fundamental message of Vision Zero, fatalities and serious injuries on our roads are unacceptable and preventable, and efforts must be taken to reduce traffic-related deaths and injuries to 0. And whereas safe roads and streets are a vital component of a livable and successful community, and whereas Vision Zero is a strategy supported by safe system policies to eliminate traffic fatalities and serious injuries while increasing safety, health, and equitable mobility for all road users. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores directs staff to investigate the development of a Vision Zero road safety charter or action plan to guide the design and management of a safe transport network with the goal of making cities, roads, and streets safer for all road users, and further that staff present their findings in an administrative report at future committee of the whole meeting for council consideration.
Thanks, Councillor Wilson, and that will be added to the agenda.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Item 14, new business. 14A, Fort Erie resolution of support for controls on Airbnbs, verbos, and others which affect the municipal rentals. Correspondence from August the 8th, 2023, and that was from our regular council meeting. I do have a resolution in front of me. Whereas the town of Fort Erie passed a resolution regarding controls on Airbnbs, verbos, and others which affect municipal rentals at their regular council meeting on July 24th, 2023. And whereas global technology platforms such as Airbnb or verbos were created to improve global access to rental opportunities, particularly those available for vacation or short-term business purposes. And whereas the impact of these disruptive technologies on rental markets has raised the following concerns in the past decade: concentration of ownership and proliferation of landlord corporations with minimal interest in or accountability to local communities, removal of housing stock from long-term rental markets with resulting increases in rent, lack of control over occupancy, incidents of nuisance infractions. And whereas any reduction in the availability of long-term housing stock runs counter to the province of Ontario's goal of 1.5 million additional homes in the next 10 years, and whereas growth in short-term rental markets may also have a negative impact on housing affordability for the seasonal workers who service tourism destinations or farming communities, and whereas implementing local municipal restrictions through municipal law enforcement tools, licensing, and municipal planning tools, zoning bylaw restrictions, may push demand to other communities. And whereas some platforms are already working toward providing notice to owners about municipal regulations and licensing through a license number field, and whereas some jurisdictions have acknowledged the limitations of local authorities, municipalities in controlling the impact of global technologies and have developed comprehensive regulatory frameworks, and whereas a comprehensive, consistent regulatory approach is likely to prove more effective in Ontario. Now therefore be it resolved that Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores supports the Town of Fort Erie's request to the Government of Ontario to establish a regulatory framework regarding digital platforms such as Airbnb and verbos to 1, require owners using the digital platforms to comply with municipal planning and licensing regulations. 2, prevent advertising of properties that are not registered with the relevant municipality. And 3, provide a contact with the platform to ensure ongoing and effective communications for provincial and municipal officials, and that the province of Ontario work with municipalities to address situations in which long-term housing stock has been lost to corporate ownership of short-term rental properties. And further, that a copy of the resolution be forwarded to the Premier of Ontario, Honourable Doug Ford, the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, John Van Toff, MPP, Temiskaming Cochrane, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Town of Fort Erie. Can I get a mover, please? It's Councillor Whalen. Councillor Graydon. Discussion? Councillor Whalen.
Yeah, I'm actually a supporter of this, although I have used Airbnb, ironically. But we humans are a unique species in that, you know, we're spending all of our efforts right now on the housing crisis, and yet we're putting tourists into our stable housing and we're putting our homeless into motel rooms. So we've completely reversed the situation. And when you investigate other countries, you can't put your house up for Airbnb unless you have a second permanent residence. So there's lots of tools available to control this. We're just not using them. So I support this.
Thanks, Councillor Whalen. Anyone else? Mr. Franks.
It's a comment. I'm not sure if anybody's thought about it, but I'm wondering if we're asking the province to do something about Airbnbs, if there's another piece that could be added to that, is that they're not eligible, or they don't pay pay municipal accommodation tax through the province's process to collect municipal accommodation tax from short-term rentals. I just wonder if both us and the town of Fort Erie may want to mention that in their resolution, because it's not quite the same issue, but it does impact the amount of tax the municipality can collect from the short-term rental.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah, and I think we can deal with that separately. James, I think this motion, Councillor Whalen, did you want to say something?
Well, just that, in other discussions I've had, that's part of this licensing requirement. If municipalities had more power and they were able to license them, then they could put the mat tax on them the same way they do as motel rooms. So, but you're right, it's not fair that we're hitting the motels and not short-term, so.
And we're not hitting the hotels yet with the mat tax, but it is a conversation, right? So again, I think to your point, Danny, that does fall under the licensing piece. So we do have a motion in front of us. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item B, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities, FNOM, it's a resolution of support for the Northern Ontario School of Medicine's request for a permanent increase in annual funding. And I do have a resolution in front of me, whereas Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores recognizes the urgent need for physicians in Northern Ontario as it is experiencing a shortage of trained physicians and specialist physicians. And whereas life expectancy of Northern residents is more than 2 years lower than the Ontario average, and mental health and addictions are at a 4-time higher rate, and whereas 1 in 8 Northern residents do not have access to family doctor, and many must travel long distances to access healthcare services, representing the failure of healthcare in Northern Ontario. And whereas communities in Northern Ontario require access to equitable health care, especially underserved rural, Indigenous, and Francophone communities, and whereas in April of 2022, the government announced an unprecedented medical expansion for Northern School of Medicine university medical programs, and whereas the current base funding rates for NOSM University have not been increased sufficiently to accommodate growth and expansion. Be it resolved, the Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores strongly requests the provincial government grant NOSM University's request for a permanent increase in annual base funding by $4 million before the end of this fiscal year, so it can continue to deliver on the mandate that the Conservative government initially established in response to the needs of Northern municipalities, and that a copy of this resolution be forwarded to the Honourable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honourable Sylvia Jones, Deputy Premier and Minister of Health, the Honourable Jill Dunlop, Minister of Colleges and Universities, John Van Toff, MPP, Temiskaming Cochrane, the leaders of the opposition parties of Ontario, the Northern Ontario School of Medicine University, the Federation of Northern Ontario Municipalities, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the Northern Ontario Academic Medicine Association. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Foley. Second by Councillor Wilson. Discussion? Councillor Whalen?
Yeah, sorry for hogging the mic. Just a quick update to this. I've had numerous calls with Dean Surma on this. Northern Ontario School of Medicine used to be just a school with a certain number of students, and we lobbied for years in order to get more doctors in the north that the intake for the School of Medicine be increased. That was done last year, I believe it was, where their intake and their graduation certificates numbers were increased. They were changed from a school to a university. Unfortunately, that never got transferred into the Minister of Finance. I've just had a meeting with both Minister of Health and Minister of Finance. This is a valid $4 million shortfall. $4 million in the realm of healthcare is not a lot of money. But as I mentioned, it never got transferred to the Minister of Finance, so we're trying to get that rushed through now so that this year there's not the shortfall, and next year it's automatically added to the funding for the university. So that's the explanation there. So I gladly support this.
Thanks, Councillor Whalen. Any other comments? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item C, memo number 022-2023-CS, and that's the enhanced smoking and vaping bylaw. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores acknowledges receipt of memo number 022-2023-CS, and that Council refers the request from the Temiskaming Health Unit for enhanced smoking and vaping measures to the Community Safety Wellbeing Committee for discussions and consideration. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Foley. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. Discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item D, memo number 023-2023-CS, and that's the land sale agreement with time limited. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores acknowledges receipt of memo number 023-2023-CS, that Council approves the proposed amendments to Schedule B, the property development agreement with time limited, to increase the building value per lot to $400,000 and to increase the time to develop the property from 3 years to 5 years. And that further, that Council directs staff to prepare the necessary bylaw to enter into an agreement with Temiskaming Mining Equipment Limited, including the proposed amendments to the property development agreement, to complete the sale of city-owned land legally described as Plan 54R 5639 PTS half LT6 Con 1 Diamond Parts 2, 3, and 4, and part of the Part 1 City of Temiskaming Shores for consideration at the September 19th, 2023 regular council meeting. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Graydon. Councillor Whalen. Discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item E, memo number 022-2023-PW, the Solid Waste Management Bylaw Amendment Tipping Fee Schedule. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores acknowledges receipt of memo number 022-2023-PW, and that Council directs staff to prepare the necessary bylaw to amend bylaw number 2015-128, the Solid Waste Management, for the replacement of the tipping fee schedule in Appendix 3 with a new schedule, including the addition of a clarifying note regarding the deposit of mixed waste categories for consideration at the September 19th, 2023 regular council meeting. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Foley. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. Discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item F, Administrative Report number PW-022-2023, the purchase agreement for Metrolinx Creative Carriage Transit Buses. I have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that Council for the City of Temiskaming Shores acknowledges receipt of Administrative Report number PW-022-2023, and that Council directs staff to prepare the necessary bylaw to enter into an agreement with Creative Carriage Limited for the supply and delivery of 2 8-meter-long floor transit buses within the Metrolink Group procurement program for a total upset limit of $553,006.44 plus applicable taxes for consideration at the September 19th, 2023 regular council meeting. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Whalen. Councillor Graydon. Discussion? All those in favor? And that motion is carried. It brings us to item 15, the bylaws. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2023-099, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2022-185, as amended to appoint community representatives to various committees and boards for the 2023 to 2026 term of council. Either the resignation of Sue Othmer. Bylaw number 2023-100, being a bylaw to authorize the sale of land, being illegally identified on Plan 54R 5639, Parts half Lot 6, Concession 1, Diamond, Parts 2, 3, and 4, and part of Parcel 1 to Temiskaming Industrial Mining Equipment Limited. Bylaw number 2023-101, being a bylaw to amend bylaw number 2015-128 to establish a system for the collection and disposal of garbage, recyclables, and other refuse, amended tipping fees. Bylaw number 2023-102, being a bylaw to enter into a rental agreement with Jade Equipment Company Limited for the supply and delivery of 3 rental graders. Bylaw number 2023-103, being a bylaw to authorize a purchase agreement with Creative Carriage Limited for the supply and delivery of 2 8-meter low-floor transit buses within the Metrolink Group procurement program. Bylaw number 2023-104, being a bylaw to enter into a lease agreement with Smitty's Canteen, Michael Smith, for the operation of the Shelley Herbert Shea Memorial Arena concession from September the 22nd, 2023 to April 30th, 2024, be hereby introduced and given first, second, and third, and final reading be signed by the mayor and clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Wilson. Thanks, Councillor Foley. Discussion? All in favor? That motion is carried. Takes us to item 16, schedule of council meetings. A, we have a committee of the whole meeting scheduled for October the 3rd, 2023, starting at 3 o'clock. And B, we have a regular council meeting scheduled for October the 17th, 2023, starting at 6 p.m. And that brings us to our question and answer period. Any questions? Seeing none. Move on to item 18, which is closed session. I do have a resolution in front of me. Be it resolved that council agrees to convene in closed session at, say, 7 o'clock to discuss the following matters. A, the adoption of the September 5th, 2023 closed session minutes. B, under Section 239, 2C of the Municipal Act 2001, proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality, 468 Georgina Avenue, the former Hailbury Fire Hall. And C, under Section 239, 2F of the Municipal Act 2001, advice subject to solicitor-client privilege update. Can I get a mover, please? Thanks, Councillor Whalen. Councillor Graydon. Discussion? All in favor? And we'll go into closed session. Thank you.